The phone slipped from my hands when I heard my own daughter, Claire, say those words that split my soul in two. Of course I'm not inviting my mother. Can you imagine how embarrassing she'll be in front of Preston's family? Her voice was so cold, so calculating, as if she were talking about discarding an old piece of furniture that was no longer useful. I stood there in the hallway of my own house, the receiver on the floor, and my heart pounding so hard I thought it was going to explode. 64 years of life, 8 years as a widow, and 38 years being a mother to that creature, only to discover she considered me an embarrassment. The conversation continued on the other end of the line. Claire was talking to someone. Probably Ashley, my daughter-in-law, that wannabe influencer who lives to post photos of the house I bought from my son, Andrew. You know how Mom Island, William is going to think we're a family of. Well, you know what I mean. It's enough that Preston accepts where we come from. Where we come from. Had she forgotten that thanks to where we come from, she was able to study architecture at an Ivy League university? That thanks to my tireless work, waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning for decades to build my small real estate empire, she could now afford to be selective with her clients? My legs trembled, and I had to lean against the wall. The wallpaper Claire had chosen last year. "Let's redecorate your house, Mom," to make it look more modern now seemed like a mockery. Everything in this house screamed of the money I had earned with my own 2 hands, the same money she spent like water. Besides, you know Mom won't know how to behave. She'll show up in one of those hideous dresses she buys from a discount rack. She'll talk too loud. She'll tell embarrassing stories from when we were kids. Claire let out a nervous little laugh that chilled my blood. Preston's family is very refined. His brother, William, is a diplomat. His mother was a former Miss America in the 80s. Can you imagine my mom trying to make conversation with those people? The receiver was still on the floor, but I couldn't move. Every word was a dagger straight to my chest. This was the same little girl who used to crawl into my bed when she had nightmares. The same one who would hug me crying when the other girls made fun of her worn-out shoes. The same one who swore that when she grew up, she would take care of me forever. Andrew agrees with me, Claire continued. He also thinks it's better if Mom doesn't go. It's going to be weird enough explaining why Dad isn't here. We don't need any more drama. Andrew, my baby, the son I carried in my arms for his first 2 years because he was so sickly. The same one for whom I paid for law school and bought his first condo when he married Ashley. Both of them, my 2 children, had decided I was an embarrassment. Claire's laugh echoed through the empty house. The best part is, she won't even notice. She's been so out of it lately. So, you know, old. She probably won't even remember there's a wedding. That's when something inside me finally shattered. It wasn't just the exclusion. It wasn't just the shame. It was the underestimation. They thought I was a foolish, senile old woman they could manipulate as they pleased, but they had no idea who they were dealing with. I was not the clueless old lady they thought I was. I was Catherine Sterling, the woman who had turned a small $5,000 loan into a real estate empire of 20 properties. The same woman who had raised 2 children alone after their father died, working 18-hour days so they would never want for anything. I hung up the phone carefully, as if it were made of glass. My mind was already racing, just like in the old days when I had to solve financial crises or negotiate with contractors who thought they could cheat me because I was a woman. I had learned long ago that revenge is a dish best served cold, and that patience is the most powerful weapon an intelligent woman can have. I went to my study, that little sanctuary filled with filing cabinets and contracts that my children had always avoided, as if it were radioactive. Mom's boring papers, Claire used to say when she was little. How ironic that those boring papers were exactly what had financed her luxuries her entire life. I turned on the computer and began to review all the transfers I had made in the last 5 years. Claire, luxury condo on the Upper East Side, $400,000. Andrew, house in Greenwich, $600,000. Claire, again, BMW, $80,000. Andrew, wedding expenses for Ashley, $200,000. Claire, master's degree in Europe, $100,000. The list was endless, and every transfer came with a sweet, manipulative justification. Mom, it's an investment in my future. It's just that Ashley is pregnant and we need more space. It'll just be a loan, I'll pay you back in 6 months. Loans that were never repaid, investments that only benefited them. As I reviewed the numbers, I remembered perfectly how it all began. It was 3 years after the death of Robert, my husband. I was shattered, lost, trying to navigate the world alone for the first time in my life. Claire had come home with tears in her eyes. "Mom, I've been offered an incredible job opportunity, but I need to look more professional. Could you help me with a small loan to update my wardrobe?" A small loan of $30,000 for clothes, but I had said yes because seeing her cry broke my heart, because I wanted her to have all the opportunities I never had. That was my first mistake, confusing money with love. Then it was Andrew. "Mom, Ashley and I want to start a family, but this condo is too small. Could you help us with the down payment?" "Just the down payment, we'll pay the rest." Of course, 6 months later they came back. "It's just that the monthly payments are too high, and Ashley had to quit her job because of the pregnancy." In the end, I paid for the entire house. The pattern was always the same. They would arrive with a sad story, an urgent need, a promise of independence. "This is the last time, Mom. After this, we won't bother you anymore. It's just until we get on our feet." Sweet lies wrapped in cheek kisses and calculated hugs. But I had been stupid. I had mistaken their need for my money for real love. I had believed I was a generous mother, when in reality I was an emotional ATM. They came, pressed the right buttons, and I spat out cash. The most painful revelation came when I found the credit card statements I had put in their names. Claire had spent $50,000 last month, Andrew $40,000. On expensive restaurants, designer clothes, weekend getaways. They lived like millionaires on my money, while I continued to buy my clothes at discount stores and cook at home to save. The phone rang. It was Claire. "Hi, Mom, how are you?" Her voice was now syrupy, affectionate, completely different from the one she had used an hour earlier to talk about me as if I were an inconvenience. "Hey, I need to talk to you about something important. Can you come over to the house tomorrow? It's about the wedding." "Of course, my love. I'll be there tomorrow," I replied with the sweetest voice I could feign. But inside, a cold smile was forming on my lips. I knew exactly what Claire wanted to discuss with me. It wasn't my presence at her wedding, but my money to finance it. I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed awake until 3 o'clock in the morning, reviewing every document, every contract, every bank transfer. My brain worked like a calculating machine, adding up years of misinterpreted generosity and unrequited love, but also planning. Because if there was one thing I had learned in my decades as a businesswoman, it was that information is power, and I had a lot of information. The next day, I arrived at Claire's house at exactly 10 o'clock in the morning, as we had agreed. I wore my simplest dress, the one she hated so much, and my worn-out faux leather bag. I wanted to look exactly like the harmless old lady they thought I was. Claire greeted me with a hug that smelled of expensive perfume and lies. "Mom, I'm so glad you came. Sit down, I made you coffee." She served me in one of the fine porcelain cups I had given her for her birthday, part of a set that cost more than a secretary's monthly salary. Everything in her house screamed luxury. The Italian furniture, the giant screen television, the works of art decorating the walls. My money turned into objects to impress strangers. "Look, Mom, I wanted to talk to you about the wedding." Claire sat across from me, crossing her legs with studied elegance. "You know Preston and I want something very special, very elegant. His family is very distinguished." There was that word again, distinguished. As if I were a second-class product that needed to be hidden so as not to ruin her premium image. I nodded, feigning the foolish smile she expected from me. "The problem is, the costs have skyrocketed much more than we thought. The venue we wanted costs $200,000 just for the rental. Then there's the food, the flowers, the music, the photographer." Claire paused dramatically, as if the numbers were overwhelming her. "In total, we're talking about almost $800,000. $800,000. It was more money than many families see in their entire lives." Claire said it as if it were a reasonable amount for a 6-hour party. I took a sip of coffee and kept my expression neutral. Preston has put in his share, of course. His family is also contributing. But we need Another calculated pause. We need you to cover the difference. It's about $400,000. $400,000. Said so casually, like someone asking to borrow $20 for the bus. Claire fidgeted with her engagement ring as she spoke. That nervous habit she'd had since she was a child when she was lying. Because she was lying. I knew perfectly well that Preston's family hadn't contributed a cent. I knew because I had done my research. I know it's a lot of money, Mom, but think of it as an investment in my future. Preston has very important connections. This wedding could open a lot of doors for my career. Her voice turned syrupy, manipulative, and it'll be the last big favor I ask of you. After this, we'll be completely independent. The last time. How many times had I heard that phrase? It was like a broken record that played every time they needed money. The last time I bother you, Mom. After this, we won't need anything else. It's the last investment in our future. Lies I had swallowed time and time again, like a fool in love with the illusion of being needed. And, Mom, Claire leaned forward, taking my hands in her perfectly manicured ones. I know we haven't officially invited you yet, but that's because we want to surprise you. The truth is, we're planning something very intimate, very family-oriented, just the closest people, more lies. I had seen the guest list lying on her coffee table. 250 people. Politicians, business leaders, influencers, all the important people Claire needed to build her image as a successful woman. But her own mother was not on that list. I just need you to confirm the money so I can book everything. The vendors are waiting. Claire squeezed my hands, feigning vulnerability. I'm counting on you, Mom. You've always been there for me. I had always been there. To pay for her whims, to finance her dreams, to clean up her financial messes. But when I needed emotional support, when I felt lonely after Robert's death, when Sundays stretched on forever in this empty house, they were nowhere to be found. Of course, my love, I replied with the same maternal smile I had perfected over the years. You know I'll always support you in everything. Claire sighed in relief, as if she had been holding her breath. She had no idea that I already knew the whole truth. You're the best mom in the world, she said, kissing my cheek with lips that tasted of falsehood. I promise this wedding will be perfect. Preston is so grateful to you. He always talks about how lucky he is to have such a generous mother-in-law. Preston, the perfect boyfriend who had never spoken more than 5 consecutive words to me in the 2 years he had been dating Claire. The same one who became uncomfortable every time I came to visit, as if my presence contaminated the sophisticated atmosphere they had created. But of course, my money didn't contaminate it, that they received with open arms. When I left Claire's house, I drove straight to the office of Arthur, my accountant, and one of the few true friends I had left. Arthur had been Robert's right-hand man in the business, and after his death, he had become my most trusted advisor. He was one of the few men I knew who didn't underestimate me for being a woman. Catherine, what a surprise to see you here. Is everything all right? Arthur stood up from his desk with a genuine smile, the kind I no longer received at home. His office smelled of coffee and old paper, a scent that calmed me because it reminded me of the time when Robert and I were building our empire together. Arthur, I need you to do me a very special favor. I want to review exactly how much money I've transferred to my children in the last 5 years. Everything, down to the last dollar. I sat across from his desk, folding my hands in my lap like the executive I had been for decades. Arthur's brow furrowed. Are you sure? Those numbers can be shocking. He knew my family well. He had been a silent witness to all their requests for money, all their financial emergencies that invariably became my responsibility. I'm more than sure. I want exact numbers, dates, purposes, and I want you to tell me what my real financial situation would be if I stopped supporting them. My voice was firm, businesslike. It had been years since I'd heard myself speak like that. Arthur worked for 2 hours, typing numbers, reviewing transfers, calculating totals. I sat there, watching as the years of my generosity turned into cold, brutal figures. When he finished, he handed me a sheet with numbers that took my breath away. In 5 years, Catherine, you've transferred $2,800,000 to Claire and Andrew. That's not counting the properties you've put in their names, the credit cards you pay monthly, and the life insurance policies of which they are the beneficiaries. Arthur looked at me with a mixture of compassion and admiration. You are an incredibly generous woman. Generous. What a nice word to describe what had actually been my systematic foolishness. $2,800,000. It was more money than most people earn in their entire working lives, and I had given it to two people who considered me an embarrassment. Now tell me, Arthur, if I were to completely cut off financial support, how long do you think they could last on their own? It was a rhetorical question. We both knew the answer. Claire spends more than she earns every month. Her job as an architect allows her to live modestly, but not the lifestyle she leads. Andrew is better off, but with the mortgage on the house, Ashley's expenses, the luxuries, I'd say 3 months at most before they're in serious trouble. 3 months. All their arrogance, all their shame towards me, all their supposed independence would crumble in 3 months without my money. It was valuable information, but also devastating. I had created 2 financial monsters who didn't know how to live without siphoning from my bank account. That night, alone in my house, I made a decision that would change everything. I poured myself a glass of wine, the expensive wine Claire had given me for my last birthday. Paid for with my money, of course. And I sat in my favorite armchair. The same armchair where Robert used to read me the financial news aloud. Where we had planned every investment, every strategic move of our business. I took out my phone and dialed the number for William, Preston's brother. I had done enough research to know he was a diplomat, a serious and respectable person. If Claire was so ashamed of me, it was time he knew exactly who the woman financing his future brother-in-law's wedding was. Good evening, William. This is Catherine Sterling, Claire's mother. I apologize for calling so late, but I need to speak with you about something very important regarding your brother's wedding. William's voice sounded surprised, but polite. Of course, Mrs. Sterling. Please, tell me how I can help. William, I need to clarify a few things about the wedding expenses. My daughter told me that your family is contributing financially, but I believe there's been a misunderstanding. I want to make sure we're all on the same page. My voice sounded sweet, innocent, like a confused old lady who just wanted to avoid problems. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Mrs. Sterling, I'm afraid I don't understand. We have not agreed to any financial contribution. Preston told us that you and Claire had everything covered. His voice betrayed genuine confusion. Perfect. Claire had lied about that too. Oh, how strange. Well, don't you worry, William. I will take care of all the expenses as always. I let that last phrase hang in the air like an accidental confession. As always? William now sounded intrigued. Pardon my curiosity, Mrs. Sterling, but have you been financing Claire for a long time? There was my opening. Well, a mother does what she has to do for her children, doesn't she? Claire has had some financial challenges. Her condo, her car, her studies in Europe. We've handled all of that within the family. I paused for calculated effect. But don't worry. I have enough properties to cover any expense. Properties. That word always got people's attention. William was a diplomat. He knew the value of real estate. How very generous of you, ma'am. Preston never mentioned that Claire had any financial needs. Oh, Claire is very proud. She doesn't like people to know she depends on her mother. But between us, William, she couldn't maintain her lifestyle without my help. Every word was a time bomb Claire wouldn't see coming. After hanging up, I dialed Andrew's number. It was time to test the loyalty of my younger son, the one who had always been weaker, more easily manipulated than Claire. If there was any chance one of my children was salvageable, it was him. Hi, Mom. Is everything okay? It's really late. Andrew's voice sounded sleepy, but also nervous. Claire had probably already told him about our conversation about the money. Andrew, my love, I need to talk to you about something very serious. It's about your sister's wedding. I settled into the armchair, preparing for the performance of my life. Claire asked me for money for the wedding. A lot of money. But there's something that's been worrying me. What is it, Mom? Andrew now sounded wide awake. Well, lately I've been thinking a lot about my future. About what will happen to me when I'm older. You both have your own lives, your own families. I let my voice crack slightly, as if it were a painful confession. Mom, what are you talking about? You're perfectly fine. But I could hear the discomfort in his voice. Andrew knew exactly where this conversation was going. Yes, I'm fine now. But what about in 5 years? In 10? I don't want to be a burden to you. I paused dramatically. I've been thinking about selling some properties and moving somewhere smaller. Something I can manage on my own. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Andrew was calculating. If I sold the properties, if I moved, if I became independent, his source of extra income, the houses he expected to inherit, the loans he never repaid, the financial cushion I represented would all be gone. Mom, don't say things like that. We would never abandon you. You're part of our family. Sweet lies, wrapped in poorly disguised panic. Oh, Andrew, that's so good to hear. Because the truth is, sometimes I feel like I'm in the way. Like with Claire's wedding, I left the sentence incomplete, waiting for his reaction. What about Claire's wedding? Andrew tried to sound casual, but I knew that voice. It was the same one he used as a boy when he had broken something. Well, Claire told me they're doing something very intimate, very small, just the most important people. And I understand, you know? At my age, I don't really fit in at those elegant celebrations. My voice was pure maternal manipulation, mixing resignation with a hint of martyrdom. Andrew swallowed audibly. Mom, I didn't know Claire told you that. There must be a misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding, my love. Claire was very clear. She says Preston's family is very distinguished, very refined. And I'm just an old woman who doesn't know how to behave in society. Every word was a dagger straight to his conscience. Mom, that's not true. Andrew stopped. He couldn't complete the sentence without lying blatantly. And we both knew it. It's all right, Andrew. I understand perfectly. You've grown up. You've moved up in the world. It's natural for you to be ashamed of your mother who comes from nothing. I paused for a long time. I just hope that when I move and sell everything, you'll understand that it was because I wanted to give you space to shine without my shadow. The line was silent for almost a minute. Andrew was processing the implications of my words. If I moved, sold the properties, became independent, they would have to learn to live on their own resources. Mom, don't make any rash decisions. Let me talk to Claire. There must be a huge misunderstanding. Andrew's voice was trembling slightly. I could hear Ashley in the background asking what was wrong, her voice sharp and worried. I promise we'll fix this. I don't want you to fight because of me, my love. If Claire thinks it's better for me not to go, I respect her decision. After all, it's her special day. My voice was pure maternal resignation, but inside I was smiling. Andrew was panicking, and that meant my plan was working. Mom, we never wanted to hurt you. Let me talk to Claire first thing in the morning. Don't do anything until we talk, okay? Now Andrew sounded desperate. All right, my love, but I already made an important decision today. I told Claire I would give her the money for her wedding. $400,000 will be my parting gift before I simplify my life. The lie dripped from my lips like poisoned honey. The silence that followed was deafening. Andrew was processing that Claire had asked for $400,000 while excluding him from the conversation. The siblings had always competed for my money, but they had learned to coordinate to maximize their gains. This broke their alliance. $400,000? Claire asked you for that much? Andrew's voice had changed. There was a note of betrayal in it now. Yes, for the venue, the food, the flowers. She says it's going to be a very elegant wedding. I suppose since you're already married, you don't need anything, right? Another calculated lie. Andrew and Ashley were always asking for money for something. Renovations, vacations, Ashley's new car. Mom, we have expenses too. Ashley's pregnant again, and we're going to need to expand the house. Andrew took the bait perfectly. Ashley's pregnant? What wonderful news. I feigned surprise and joy, although I knew perfectly well it was a lie. Ashley had posted photos of herself drinking wine on social media last week. Of course I'll help you with that too. After all, you do include me in your lives. That last phrase was the finishing blow. Andrew understood the message perfectly. Claire got money but excluded me. He included me but got nothing. It was an equation that did not work in his favor. I hung up the phone feeling a satisfaction I hadn't experienced in years. For the first time in a long time, I was in control of the situation. My children were used to manipulating me, but they had forgotten that I had been a businesswoman long before I was a mother. I knew all the negotiation tactics, all the pressure strategies. The next day, early in the morning, the show began. Claire called me, hysterical, at 7 o'clock in the morning. "Mom, what did you say to Andrew? He's furious with me. He says I'm selfish, that I'm excluding him from everything. Good morning, my love. I don't understand why Andrew is upset. I just told him about your wedding, about how beautiful it's going to be." My voice was that of an innocent old lady who doesn't understand why everyone is yelling. "You told him I asked for $400,000 and that I'm excluding him from the wedding." Claire was losing control. Something very rare for her. She had always been calculating, cold. "Well, it's the truth, isn't it? You asked me for that money yesterday." I paused innocently. "And about Andrew? Well, he asked if he was going to be at the wedding. And I told him it was just for important people. I thought he knew." Claire cursed under her breath. "Mom, Andrew is my brother. Of course he's invited to my wedding." "Oh, that's good to know. So when you said important people, you were only referring to me. I understand." My voice dripped with wounded innocence. "No, I mean, Mom, of course you're important. It's just that." Claire trailed off, unable to explain why her own mother wasn't important enough for her wedding. "It's all right, my love. I got the message. That's why I decided to simplify my life. I spoke with a real estate agent yesterday about selling some properties. If you no longer need me as a mother, at least I won't be a financial burden." I let those words sink into her brain like acid. "You're selling properties? Which properties?" Claire's voice had lost all pretense. It was now pure financial panic. "Well, first the beach house, then the downtown apartments. William gave me some very good advice yesterday on how to liquidate assets intelligently." I mentioned William casually, as if it had been a routine conversation. "You spoke with William? Preston's brother?" Now Claire sounded on the verge of a heart attack. "Yes, what a nice young man, so polite. He explained that his family won't be contributing financially to the wedding, that Preston told them you and I had everything under control." A dramatic pause. "He asked a lot about my properties. He seemed very impressed." Claire hung up without saying goodbye. I knew she was rushing to call Preston, probably to ask him what exactly he had told his family about the Sterlings' financial situation. Over the next 3 days, my phone didn't stop ringing. It was like watching dominoes fall, one by one. First, Andrew called, trying to convince me to have lunch with him and Ashley to clear things up. Then Claire, with a strangely sweet voice, inviting me for coffee to plan the wedding details together. Then Andrew again, offering to take me to the doctor because, lately, I sounded very stressed. But the most revealing call came on Thursday night. It was Julia, my 16-year-old granddaughter, Andrew, and Ashley's daughter. Her voice sounded different, more mature than usual. "Grandma, can I come see you tomorrow after school? I need to talk to you." Julia had always been special, the only one in the family who seemed to have inherited my business instincts and my ability to see through lies. "Of course, my love, come whenever you want." Julia was my weak spot, the only person in this family who loved me without financial conditions. The next day, Julia arrived at my house in her school uniform with a serious expression that reminded me of myself at her age. She sat in the kitchen, refused the juice I offered, and got straight to the point. "Grandma, Mom, and Dad have been talking a lot about you lately," arguing in hushed tones, stopping conversations when I walk into the room. Julia had Robert's eyes that missed no detail. "Mom is obsessed with checking her bank accounts, and Dad looks super stressed." "And what do you think about all that, my love?" I asked, genuinely curious about the perspective of the only honest person in this family. "I think they're scared you're going to stop supporting them." Julia looked me straight in the eye. "And I think it's about time." Her words hit me harder than all the desperate calls from her parents. Here was a 16-year-old who perfectly understood the toxic dynamic I had been feeding for years. "Grandma, I've been watching this family my whole life. I've seen how Dad and Aunt Claire constantly ask you for money, how Mom plans expensive purchases right before visiting you. how they all act differently when they need something. Julia spoke with a maturity that broke my heart, and I've also seen how you give them everything without asking for anything in return. It's what a mother does, Julia. A grandmother. I tried to justify decades of behavior I knew was wrong. No, Grandma. A mother teaches her children to be independent. A grandmother loves them, but doesn't turn them into parasites. Julia took my hands in hers. Mom told me yesterday that if you sell the properties, we'll have to move to a smaller place, as if it's a tragedy that we'd have to live on the money Dad actually earns. The brutal honesty from Julia left me speechless. I had raised 2 children who didn't know the value of $1 because they never had to earn one. And now they were raising their own children with the same mentality of entitlement and dependency. Julia, did you know that Claire didn't invite me to her wedding? I asked, needing to know how far the family conspiracy went. Julia nodded sadly. Mom told me about it like it was normal. She said Aunt Claire wanted an elegant wedding and that you wouldn't fit in. I asked her how she could exclude her own mother, and she told me I wouldn't understand because I was too young. Julia squeezed my hands. But I do understand, Grandma. I understand that they're ashamed of you because you're real, because you worked hard, because you don't pretend to be something you're not. In that moment, seeing my granddaughter defend my dignity when my own children were trampling on it, I made my final decision. Julia was the only one who deserved my inheritance, the only one who had inherited my true values. Julia, I need you to help me with something very important, but it will require you to keep some secrets, even from your parents. My voice had become conspiratorial, businesslike. What do you need, Grandma? Julia leaned forward, her eyes shining with curiosity. I need you to help me organize a family meeting. I want everyone to be present on Saturday night. Tell them I have something very important to announce about my future. I smiled with a coldness I hadn't felt in years. And I need you to bring your phone to record everything that's about to happen. Julia looked at me with a mix of admiration and worry. Grandma, what are you planning? Justice, my love. After 64 years of life, I'm finally going to serve a dish of very cold justice. I took my granddaughter's hands in mine. And you are going to witness a woman reclaiming her dignity. That night, after Julia left, I sat in my study and finished preparing all the documents. Bank transfers, account statements, screenshots of conversations, call recordings, all meticulously organized in folders bearing the names of each of my children. Saturday would be the day the Sterling family would finally understand who had been controlling the money all this time. On Saturday night, they all arrived at my house at exactly 8 o'clock, as I had requested. Claire arrived first, elegant and nervous, carrying a bouquet of expensive flowers she had probably bought with my money. Andrew and Ashley arrived 5 minutes later, with Julia walking behind them, her phone discreetly ready in her pocket. Mom, it's so good you brought us all together. We haven't had a family dinner in so long, Claire said, kissing my cheek with lips that tasted of rehearsed lies. Yes, I needed to talk to all of you about some important decisions I've made, I replied, gesturing for them to sit in the living room. I had prepared coffee and cookies, like in the old days when we were truly a family. Ashley settled on the sofa, constantly checking her phone. Andrew couldn't stop tapping his watch, nervous. Claire smiled too much, that forced smile she used when she wanted something. Only Julia seemed calm, sitting in the armchair in the corner, observing everything with those intelligent eyes that missed no detail. Well, as you know, lately I've been reflecting a lot on my future, on what will happen to me when I'm older. I began pouring coffee into the cups Claire had chosen for me last year. And I've also been thinking about you, about your lives, about everything you've achieved. Claire leaned forward. Mom, you're perfectly fine. You don't need to worry about those things yet. Of course I do, Claire. At my age, you have to be realistic. I took a sip of coffee, savoring the moment. That's why I've made some very important decisions about my estate. The silence in the room grew thick. Andrew stopped tapping his watch. Ashley looked up from her phone. Claire maintained her smile, but I saw the muscles in her neck tense. First, I want to tell you about a very interesting conversation I had with William, Preston's brother. I directed my gaze at Claire, who instantly turned pale. It turns out he had no idea you were expecting a financial contribution from his family for the wedding. That was a misunderstanding. Claire started to speak, but I held up a hand to silence her. Let me finish, my love. William was very interested when I told him about all the properties I own, about how I've been financing my family for years. I smiled sweetly. He thought it was very generous of me to support adult children who have professional careers. Andrew cleared his throat. Mom, we're not being supported. We have jobs, our own income. Really, Andrew? I pulled out the first folder of documents I had prepared. According to my records, in the last 5 years, I have transferred $1,200,000 to you. Your salary as a lawyer is $40,000 a month. Without my help, you couldn't even pay the mortgage on your house. Andrew fell silent. Ashley looked at him with an expression that mixed panic with reproach. It was obvious she didn't know the exact figures of their financial dependence. And you, Claire? I pulled out the second folder. In the same period, you've received $1,600,000. Your job as an architect allows you to live modestly, but not for the penthouse in the city, nor the BMW, nor the trips to Europe. Claire tried to maintain her composure. Mom, those were loans, investments in our future. Loans? I laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. Claire, show me a single document that establishes repayment terms. A single piece of paper where you acknowledge that you owe me money. Total silence, because those documents didn't exist. They had never intended to pay me back. But the most interesting part, I continued, is that during all these years that I've given you millions of dollars, you have decided that I am not good enough to be in your important lives. I took out my phone and played the recording of Claire talking about the wedding. Her own voice filled the room. Of course I'm not inviting my mother. Can you imagine how embarrassing she'll be in front of Preston's family? Claire shot to her feet as if she had been electrocuted. Mom, you recorded that conversation? I didn't record anything, Claire. You simply forgot to hang up the phone when you were talking to Ashley. I lied with an icy calm. For 20 minutes, I listened to you talk about me as if I were a shameful nuisance. Andrew tried to mediate. Claire, is that true? Did you really say those things? It's not what it sounds like. I was stressed, worried about the wedding. Claire stammered, losing all her studied elegance. You were worried about looking bad in front of your boyfriend's family. A family that, by the way, isn't contributing a single dollar to your $800,000 wedding. My voice had become sharp, businesslike. A wedding that I am expected to fully finance, but to which I am not invited. Ashley finally spoke, her voice small and nervous. Catherine, there must be an explanation. The explanation is very simple, Ashley. My children have lived like millionaires on my money, but they are ashamed of the woman who works to give it to them. I stood up, feeling an energy I hadn't experienced in years. That's why I've made definitive decisions about my future and yours. Effective immediately, all credit cards in your names are canceled. All monthly transfers are permanently suspended. All properties in your names revert to my legal control. My voice was as firm as steel, each word calculated for maximum impact. Claire leaped from her seat. Mom, you can't do that. I have commitments, scheduled payments. Of course I can, Claire. They are my cards, my money, my properties. I only put them in your names for tax purposes, but legally they are still mine. I pulled out a folder full of legal documents. Arthur has already prepared all the paperwork. It goes into effect on Monday. Andrew looked devastated. Mom, we have a mortgage, Julia's expenses, the life we've built. The life I built for you, Andrew. With my work, my money, my sacrifice. I turned to him with an icy calm. And now you're going to learn to build your own lives with your own resources. Ashley was crying silently. Claire was pacing like a caged animal. Andrew had his head in his hands. Only Julia remained serene, discreetly recording everything. This is emotional blackmail, Claire shouted. You're punishing us for a private conversation? Emotional blackmail? My laugh was cold and sharp. Claire, you plan to get married on my dime at a party I'm not invited to. And I'm the blackmailer? Preston is going to call everything off. His family is going to think we're grifters. Claire was completely losing control. Perhaps you should have thought of that before you called me an embarrassment in front of that very same family. I sat down calmly, enjoying watching her unravel. But don't worry, Claire. I have a proposal. They all looked at me with desperate hope. You can have the money for the wedding, the $400,000 you asked for, but on one condition. I sit at the head table. You proudly introduce me as your hardworking mother who financed your entire education, and you publicly thank the woman who made your life of luxury possible. Claire turned pale. I can't do that. Preston's family. Then there's no money. And without money, there's no wedding. I shrugged. You decide what's more important, your fake image or your marriage. Andrew tried one last plea. Mom, think about it. We're your family, your only children. My only children who are ashamed of me, who lie to me, who use me as an ATM. I stood up and walked over to Julia. But I'm not completely cruel. Julia is not to blame for having parasitic parents. I placed my hand on my granddaughter's shoulder. Julia, you remain my sole beneficiary. When I die, everything will be yours. But when you turn 18, you will also have access to an educational trust I have created specifically for you. Julia hugged me tightly. Thank you, Grandma. But I just want you to be happy. I'm going to be happy, my love, for the first time in years. I looked at my children, who were watching me with a mixture of shock and desperation. I'm moving next week. I bought a beautiful condo in Naples, near the water. Julia can visit whenever she wants. You're moving? Andrew looked lost. And this house? I'm selling it. I already have a buyer. I smiled with genuine satisfaction. A young couple who will turn it into a home filled with real love. Claire collapsed onto the sofa. Mom, you can't destroy our family like this. I didn't destroy anything, Claire. You destroyed this family when you decided my money was more valuable than my presence. I walked to the door. The meeting is over. You have until Wednesday to collect your things from my house. 3 months later, I was sitting on the terrace of my new condo, drinking coffee as I watched the sunrise over the Gulf. Julia came to visit every weekend, telling me about her university plans, her dreams of studying business administration. She was the only one who had inherited my entrepreneurial spirit. Claire called off the wedding. Preston left her when he learned the truth about her financial situation. Andrew and Ashley had to sell the house and move into a small apartment. They both got part-time jobs to get by. They never apologized. They never acknowledged their mistake. But they also never asked me for money again. I found peace in the silence, in the mornings by the water, in the afternoons reading books I hadn't had time to enjoy for years, in the nights planning Julia's business future. I had learned the most important lesson of my life, that true love cannot be bought with money, and that dignity is priceless. My children chose money over love. I chose my peace over their parasitism. And I never, ever looked back. 2 years after that night that changed everything, I received an unexpected call. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was watering my plants on the terrace when the phone rang. The name on the screen surprised me. Andrew. Hi, Mom. His voice sounded different, more mature, tired. I know I have no right to call you after so long, but I needed to talk to you. I sat in my favorite chair, the one I had bought with my own savings, without asking for anyone's opinion. Go on, Andrew. Mom, Ashley and I, we're getting a divorce. His voice broke slightly. It turns out that when your money ran out, she realized she didn't love the man I really am, but the lifestyle you gave us. I felt neither satisfaction nor sadness, just a kind of cosmic inevitability. I'm sorry, Andrew. No, you're not, Mom, and you're right not to be. Andrew paused for a long time. These 2 years have been the hardest of my life, but also the most honest. For the first time in decades, I had to face who I really am without your money as a shield. I heard the background noise of a coffee shop. Andrew was somewhere public, probably gathering the courage for this call for hours. And who are you, Andrew? I asked with genuine curiosity. I'm a mediocre lawyer who for years felt entitled to his mother's money. I'm a father who taught his daughter that money is asked for, not earned. I'm a man who was ashamed of the hardest working woman he knows. His voice trembled. I'm a coward who let his sister mistreat you because it was financially convenient for me. His words were like knives, but knives that were finally cutting in the right direction. Mom, I'm not calling to ask for money. I'm not calling to ask for forgiveness, because I know I don't deserve it. I'm calling to tell you that I finally understand what you did to us." Andrew took a deep breath. "You forced us to grow up." I remained silent, processing his words. Outside, an elderly couple walked hand in hand along the waterfront. I had been watching them take the same walk every afternoon for 2 years, and I always wondered if that's what true love looked like. "Andrew, how is Julia?" That was the question that really mattered to me. Julia Island. Incredible. She got a 4.0 this semester. She got a part-time job at an accounting firm. She says she wants to learn the value of money before she inherits yours. Andrew laughed, but it wasn't a bitter laugh. "She's identical to you, Mom. She has that determination, that business savvy." "And Claire?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. "Claire." Andrew sighed. "Claire is working at a small architecture firm. She lives in a modest apartment, drives a used car. She looks real for the first time in years. But she's also furious. Furious with you, furious with me, furious with the world, furious about what? Because she discovered that all the important connections she thought she had were actually connections to your money. When the expensive dinners and lavish gifts stopped, so did the fake friendships." Andrew paused. "Preston married an heiress 6 months after he left her." I stood up from my chair and walked to the railing of the terrace. The sun was beginning to set, painting the water gold. It was a sight I never tired of. "Andrew, why are you telling me all this?" "Because I want you to know that your plan worked. You broke us to rebuild us. And even though Claire still doesn't get it, I do." His voice had become firm. "I want you to know that I'm learning to be a better man. And Ashley, how is she handling the divorce?" Andrew laughed bitterly. "Ashley already has a new boyfriend, an older businessman who supports her, just like I supported her with your money. Some people never learn." We were silent for several minutes. I watched the sunset. He probably stared into his cold coffee in some anonymous cafe. "Mom, there's something else I need to tell you." Andrew took a deep breath. "The day you turned 66, Julia asked me why we didn't call to wish you a happy birthday. I didn't know what to tell her. My birthday had passed quietly, with only Julia visiting with a homemade cake and a handmade card. It had been perfect. I didn't need any calls, Andrew. Yes, you did, Mom. And we needed to make them, but we were too proud, our egos too bruised, to admit that we missed you." Andrew was quiet for a moment. "I missed you not as an ATM, but as a mother." I felt something wet on my cheeks and realized I was crying. Not from sadness, but from something more complex. Perhaps relief, perhaps hope. "Andrew, what do you expect from this call?" "Nothing, Mom. Absolutely nothing. I just wanted you to know that the man you raised still exists under all the garbage I piled on top of him." His voice broke again. "And I wanted you to know that I'm proud to be the son of Catherine Sterling, the woman who built an empire with her own 2 hands." I hung up the phone and stood there, watching the last light of day fade over the water. For the first time in 2 years, I felt something like hope for my family. Maybe true love can't be bought with money, but sometimes it's found in the silence that remains when the money is gone.